Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Armchair Booking Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Stunning Steve Barber. And as you notice, I'm actually running solo this week. And it's actually going to be a relatively short show compared to what I normally put out. I just wanted to hit on a couple of, and it's actually kind of a sad show. As you can see by the title, I'm actually going to be discussing three wrestling people who actually, unfortunately, we lost this week. And so uh and that's why it's short, and that's why I decided to go just to go and do the solo because I didn't want to kind of drag anybody else into it. And first I want to go ahead and give the contact information for the show. If you'd like to email the show, it's armchairbookingpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find the show at Armchair Booking Podcast on Facebook. You can find it on Twitter at Booking Armchair, also known, of course, Twitter, also known as X. You can find us on Instagram. You can find it on TikTok. And also, the show is on any audio platform you can think of. If the show is not there, please let me know, and I will do whatever I can to get it added. And of course, that means that you must have listened to the show on somebody else's device, maybe, and you're like, well, let me go check to see if it's on there, or somebody may have told you about the show. You're going to check it out. But yeah, absolutely. Let me just, if you find out that somebody's trying to find it and they say, hey, it's not on whatever my preferred platform was, let me know, and I'll do whatever I can to get the show added. And speaking of audio platforms, if you give the show a 5-star rating and a review on any of the platforms where you can actually give a review, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Good Pods, I will actually read the review on air. If you use a platform that does not allow reviews, still give it the rating. That actually helps with the algorithm, helps the show get noticed. And screenshot it, send me an email at armchairbookingpodcast@gmail.com and send your review in your email itself, and I will also read that on you. And the show is on YouTube. You already see that. Hopefully, if you use YouTube as your preferred platform, which I know some people do, hit the like, share, subscribe button, and honestly share the show because, man, our subscriber count would jump up and then it'll kind of plateau. Then it'll jump and then it'll plateau. Then it'll jump plateau. And if you are subscribed to the show on YouTube, absolutely, just actually watch the episodes. That certainly helps me, and it certainly helps the show grow. And that's what I'm trying to do. And if you are a wrestler or if you are involved with the wrestling business, if you want to be on the show, let me know. If you're a fan, hit me up and we'll see what we can do. And and from that, I just want to go ahead and jump into the news. So they say all deaths, celebrity wise, tend to come in threes. And I don't know if that's exactly proven to be true, but it does seem to happen quite a bit. And the wrestling world is no exception to this. We found out earlier this week, and and this was one I think everybody kind of knew it was coming, and that was um, the longtime wrestler promoter um, Ole Anderson passed away on the 26th of February. Real name was Alan Robert Rogowski, and he was a wrestler, booker, promoter. He was part of the Anderson family. He was one of the founders of the Four Horsemen, and he was such an influence in wrestling. And I'm not going to say, I don't want to go into too much of his personal life because he was also known to not be a nice person. And you'll hear some wrestlers actually accuse him, and I have no reason to doubt them, of very blatant racism. I mean, he would drop the N word on somebody. In fact, even Teddy Long actually said that on one of the panel shows WWE used to do. He said, "Only," he said he would call you that in a heartbeat. But I don't want to focus on that. I do want to throw it out there, but I do want to talk about the influence because he was part of the Four Horsemen, and which is considered, arguably the greatest stable of all time. And he was part of the Minnesota Wrecking Crew himself, and then Gene Anderson, and then of course Lars Anderson, and then of course later on Arn Anderson. And they said Ric Flair was their cousin. So I mean they had this family. Now none of them were actually related, but there was only one Anderson, and that was Gene Anderson. But Ole was a big part of that. And as far as like him booking, and I mean, he wrote a lot of these classic storylines that you might see in wrestling, especially during like the Mid Atlantic area and Georgia Championship Wrestling. And but unfortunately, he passed away on, like I said, the 26th, and um, and it was kind of known because he had multiple sclerosis and he was suffering memory loss, and he had had a couple of falls, but he was 81 years old. So, I mean, he lived a pretty full life. And one of the things I didn't know until I was actually doing a little bit of research, he was also an Army veteran. So he actually served a stint in the Army, just one enlistment, but he was in the Army. He was stationed in Germany. And, but the rest of the world, I mean, definitely had a great loss there. And, whatever you thought of him, he didn't want to do interviews because he was thought of, as just this bitter man, because he was kind of bitter at the business because it was not the same business that it was whenever he was in. The second one that happened, because Ole died on the 26th, and then we got news on the 28th. My friend Kyle texted me and he said, first Ole and now Virgil. Virgil, real name Michael Jones, 72 years old. And he was best known as Virgil, just one name. He was I don't want to say assistant, but he kind of was for Ted DiBiase. And Ted DiBiase, when he first started the $1 Million Man gimmick, and he had Virgil as his second. I mean, he was kind of a manager, but he was always when he would come to the ring with Ted DiBiase, and sometimes he would interfere for him, but he wasn't exactly a manager. He was in a way, he was more of a bodyguard. And Ralph Sharon, that's what everybody knows him as. And so even now, you see people, oh, Virgil, yeah, and later on he split apart from DiBiase because he got tired of the way DiBiase was treating him, and he ended up winning the $1 Million belt. Now, I mean, so he didn't have a ton of like titles and things like that, because he really didn't go above mid card, but he he made an impact. I mean, people knew who he was, but the name Virgil, of course, was a play on the name Virgil Runnels, which was Dusty Rhodes' real name, and they called Mike Jones Virgil, and he was a pretty decent wrestler. I apologize. I had a very brief interruption there. But like I was saying about the wrestler Mike Jones, Virgil, who passed away, the name itself was a rib on Dusty Rhodes because Dusty Rhodes was the booker in WCW at the time. Well, then Dusty Rhodes ended up coming to WWF, and that's what it was known as at the time. And he ended up feuding with Ted DiBiase. That was the funny thing. But this is after Virgil had actually broke away from the $1 Million Man. Well, later on, when the NWO was formed and they brought in Jones there, they decided, because they couldn't call him Virgil because of copyright issues, well, they named him Vincent, which was another rib because it was a play on the name Vince McMahon, of course, who was the owner of WWF, WWE, and so Virgil was also in the past few years, he had been making appearances on, some of the cons, the different fan fests, and there was also people would spot him like at airports, and but I mean, he was still. It seemed like every time we talked about it, he was actually pretty well liked, and it was almost sad to see that, but at the same time, I mean, people still liked him, and and he seemed to be doing okay, but he unfortunately passed away on the 28th, and he was 72 years old, and he had complications from he had two strokes, and he was also being diagnosed with dementia, which is unfortunate. And he had also said he was diagnosed with stage 2 colon cancer, and then he had 2 more strokes. I mean, he kind of went through it there at the end, but But I mean, either way, I mean, the wrestler definitely lost another good one because he was very well liked. And that's the same thing about Ole. Not to be mean about Ole. Ole seemed like he was not, or people didn't have always had a lot of good to say about him, like as a person, whereas Mike Jones, they did. So there's kind of a difference between the two of them. And then the third one, I just found this out last night. And even though this actually happened a couple of days ago, on the 29th, the wrestling world lost Paul Vachon, also known as Butcher Vachon. Canadian wrestler, French Canadian from Montreal. He was 86 years old. And he was part of the famous Vachon family. His brother was Mad Dog Vachon, Maurice Mad Dog Vachon, and he also had a sister, Vivian Vachon, and they were all wrestlers. And then his adopted daughter, who was Luna Vachon. So he was part of a famous wrestling family, and he was married 4 times. He had 6 kids, and he was another one. He was influential as far as like the kind of brutal, take no prisoners kind of wrestler. Um, didn't mess around because his brother was the Mad Dog, and so well, Paul was the Butcher. And if you're going to have a name like Butcher, then you better live up to it. And he did. But if you ever saw some of the footage from his time in the ring, he definitely lived up to the name. And there were times later on, and I just want to say during the Attitude Era that he actually would show up on camera for a short spell. And him and his brother Mad Dog as well. And of course, this is when Luna, who also, by the way, she passed away several years ago, and but they were supporting her. And so once we had somebody of another famous wrestling family who has left us, and even though he was 86 years old, it does still feel like he left us too soon. So, but yeah, I just wanted to pass on that news, pass along our condolences to all three of the families of Ole Anderson, of Mike Virgil Jones, and of Paul Vachon, Butcher Vachon. And, you know, we definitely lost some good ones. And we just know it affects all of us. Our tomorrows aren't guaranteed. And, so just make sure you live your best life and leave, a good reputation whenever you go. And really, I mean, that's all that I have to say for today. Like I said, it's a short show, but I wanted to kind of give my own thoughts on the three of them. And honestly, I mean, I feel like I don't have a lot, but at the same time, I mean, I do still recognize the contribution they gave to the wrestling world. But till we can actually speak again, just going to say good day and God bless.